Welcome to Build 27, Part 1. This is going to be another extremely high-end liquid-cooled system from Singularity Computers, and it's going into the Caselabs Magnum SMA8. We've certainly done a lot of Caselabs builds in our time. I mean, these cases, understandably, are extremely popular with enthusiasts who want to build high-end liquid cooling systems because, I mean, you can't really build a high-end liquid cooling system into other cases very easily due to the restriction of radiator capacity. And radiator capacity is important if you want a very quiet build, because if you have way more radiator capacity than you need, then you can obviously run your fans at extremely low RPMs, and that's what I do in a lot of my builds, certainly going to be doing in this one, because this build does have an Aquero. Now, we're going to be doing a few unique things in this build, including some mods which are going to be focused around the water cooling loops. Now, for some people, their passion kind of lies in one thing more than anything else. It might be modding, it might be the hardware. For me, it is most certainly liquid cooling, and it always has been. It's always the water cooling system in my builds that I really care about and enjoy the most. And so it's this area that I'm going to continually focus on, doing new things with. You can only push the boundaries so far when you're doing customer systems. And that is why coming up, you're going to be seeing us doing, R&D for our own products. And that means doing more personal projects. But it's taken us a long time to get back to doing personal projects. I'm sure some of you are going to be happy to see that the power supply for this build is not too overkill. At least it's not another AX1500i. So the Corsair HX1000i. Now the pinout for the entire i series is actually the same. So you can just grab the pinout for the Corsair AX1200i, which makes it easy because that's a very popular power supply. The pinout is everywhere, and it'll work for the entire i series. I'm sure you've gathered what the color scheme for this build is. So we have the gunmetal case, we have the amazing Asus X99 EWS USB 3.1, the new version, which just goes so perfectly with the memory that we have for this build. I'm very privileged to again be using Corsair Special Edition memory. There are 3 different versions. I like all 3 equally. I've been using this a lot lately and will be using it a lot more coming up. So this is the Blackout version. So yes, the color scheme is black and silver. For the pump and reservoir combinations, we have Singularity Computers Protium Large reservoirs. We actually just released our extra large reservoirs. They're 350 millimeters long. It turns out they're actually a perfect fit for this case. Standalone with the quad port caps, they go top to bottom with a small gap on each end. So we have the polished acrylic silver versions of the reservoirs and all of the other components to match. So Protium D5 polished acrylic tops, Protium D5 silver covers, and also ethereal dual silver reservoir mounts. Now, I'm a very obsessive person, and I've been doing this for more than half of my life now, 15 years, and at least a decade of that time, this has been my sole obsession. And we design these components from all of my experience, and I design these components for people like me, for enthusiasts who love and have a passion for building systems, who take, a huge amount of enjoyment in it. And, these are just our first components. What is coming is far beyond this. And we are going to really start to, now that we have a name for ourselves and people understand that we are, we're serious about this, we can start to make some change, really push things forward, which I think this industry has been in need of for a long time. And what is coming is just so exciting. But, for an enthusiast product, maximum compatibility and versatility. So mounting options, there are M4 threads on 3 sides of our D5 pump tops, which means you can mount it directly to any case panel. To our 120 or 140 millimeter backplates, which means directly to any radiator. To our D5 and DDC pump mounts, which allows you to mount them in, basically any direction. So almost endless mounting options. And then we have a huge amount of inlet-outlet options. Any component in your build, any fixed position that the loop needs to run to, the more options you have for that component, the more you're going to be able to perfect your loop. You don't want components like a pump top to restrict what you do with your loop. You want it to enhance it, to give you more options, because the tube routing is vital for the overall aesthetics of the build. Now that I have such versatile components, I'm able to do all of the things that I've been wanting to do for so many years. And so the mods that we're doing here are through panel mods for the loop. I'm going to be running it on both sides of the build. And it would actually be really good to have a window on the rear side panel for this build. We'll see about that later on, because the back is going to be certainly a lot more interesting than usual, because some of the loop is going to be running back there. I think it's going to be about 60-40, 60 at the front. Now that first mock-up you could see I did, that would actually be possible if I used a 30 millimeter thick 480 millimeter radiator above the top panel and the fans on the inside. But, that's a bit of a sacrifice in terms of radiator capacity for, a fairly unique and interesting idea for the loops. Very, subtle, understated, and just extremely functional as well. But we've decided to do something a little bit in between, because we didn't want to drop back to a 30 millimeter thick radiator. So you can see how I do my fan cables. This just works so well. There is no mess here whatsoever. This actually ends up all completely hidden anyway, but still, you put the fan splitter close to the fans. That way, the bulk of the cables are as short as possible. The case mods are complete, and I've started installing the components for the final time. So I've installed the lower 2 radiators, the 560mm and 280mm, and the fans, which means I've also started on the custom cables. So the fan splitters are at the front here. You probably can't see them, but it's nice and easy access there. When it comes time, I will remove that front panel to run the extension cables from the fan splitters up to the Aquero. And each set of fans on each radiator will get an individual PWM fan channel on the Aquero, so that we will have individual control over the cooling of each radiator from the Aquero, all automated with fan curves. So this is the 480mm radiator and fans, which is about to be installed onto the top panel. And just a quick look at the fan mods that I do. I've shown this a few times previously, but there are actually two ways that I do my fan mods. Now, I almost always these days take the stickers off, replace it with matte black vinyl if I'm going to sleeve into the center. Now, if you're going to sleeve into the center, you have to also modify the fan frame because the sleeve makes the wire too thick. So I've cut off this section here and these here. That actually needs a little bit more of a file so that that can sit in there nicely and everything fits. Now, if the fan cables are long enough, the stock cables, to run where I want them to run, which in this build is to one end of the radiator where I'm going to be putting the splitters on all of the radiators. Well, in that case, I will just sleeve the stock fan cables. And you can see that's what I've done here because they're all long enough to reach. Now, because I don't yet know the lengths, I've just left them like this, so I haven't finished them yet. And when I route them and I do the cable management, I'll figure out the exact length, then I'll cut them, pin them, put the connectors on and the heat shrink. And after that, I'll then properly, permanently manage the cables. You can't do it before because then you can't pull the sleeve tight, which is always a very important part of sleeving. If you have loose sleeve, it's just, a sign that you've been a bit slack with your sleeving. Now, if the fan cables are not long enough, which is often the case, because I want everything to match, I will cut them off really short at the fan here and run extensions on all of them. So, that's the two ways I do it so that either way it matches. So I've also installed the power supply, which is in the bottom compartment on the other side with the 280mm radiator, and the motherboard is back in position. Now, the case mods that I've done don't look like much. Compared to some panel mods that I often do, they look like absolutely nothing, yet so much effort has gone into this due to all of the test fitting. This has really taken a lot of time. I mean, just to get those two holes just there, I had to install the motherboard, graphics card water blocks, and then run tube down there, which it is a great idea to do that with extension fittings because it saves a whole lot of time. So we have the two holes down there for the graphics cards, and you can start to see from the positions of these holes how I'm going to be running the loops. We have this hole here, and of course bits power through fittings on all of them. Another one up the top there. I'll explain how I'm going to be running the loop later in the build log. Now you can see there are 4 holes for each pump and reservoir combination. Now these holes will get through panel fittings, so it will certainly all be very clean looking. Now initially when I did this, I actually planned not to use through panel fittings, but it ends up just not looking clean enough because no matter how carefully you drill these holes, you can never get them perfectly round, and the eye can always see it. And because, if I was repainting the case, it wouldn't be an issue at all, but because it's not going to be repainted, it is aluminium, so no concern with rust or corrosion, but the problem is it just doesn't look as clean when it's not painted over after you modify the case. But I found a way to have bits power through panel fittings on all 4 holes. Now, you're probably wondering why there are 4 holes. Keep in mind you need a fill port and a drain port for each one, as well as an inlet and outlet. On one of them, I actually won't, because it's going to, I'm not going to be running the loop back to the top of the res on the GPU loop. But I still want to have the extra hole anyway because, there's 4 holes on the other one. I thought I might as well just drill them all. You'll see how it turns out later on anyway. But all of this was extremely difficult to test fit and, to get it all perfectly lined up, because you can see there are so many mounting points and just no margin for error at all here. But the fittings I've used, so that little fitting just there is a male to male fitting. So it has a male thread on both sides and then about a 5mm extension in between, and that goes directly into the through panel fitting, and that's going to work out really nicely. And then up here I've used D-plugs, and this was the only way I could do it. That is a 10mm extension fitting and a 1-inch D-plug, and then the through panel fitting. Because I'm running both of the loops into the rear compartment, it's going to interfere with the stock hard drive bays and hard drive mounting position. And so I'm going to make space to mount 2 hard drives onto the back of the motherboard tray. So on the back of the motherboard tray, in a lot of Caselabs cases, we have this big cover panel, which turns out to be a perfect place for mounting components, specifically drives. So there's only 1 hard drive going into this build, but I'm going to make a spot for a second one. And I'm also going to mount the FARB work back here. It's just a perfect position for it, and usually it doesn't interfere with sliding the motherboard tray in and out of position, although if it does, it's only 5 screws to remove this panel, and then you can remove the motherboard. That's it for this part of the build log. Thanks for watching, and remember that none of this would be possible without our customers and our patrons.